Good day, everybody, and welcome to the sixth episode of Inside SWTOR, the show where gamers gab about the universe of Star Wars: The Old Republic. I am Sandy Cindermisha Smith. I am a community manager with fragworld.org, and I am guild leader of Pillars of Ajla. I'd like to turn it over to my fellow panelists so that they can introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Chris Hammond, also known as MacArthurian. I like waffles, long walks on the beach, and Chuck Norris t-shirts.
Hello, I'm also Fraser, also known as Fast Card or FC. And for those joining us today, get ready for your drinking game, for the FC drinking game.
I'm Josh Room Smith, and I think the two introductions before mine were just super. They were awesome. I also enjoy waffles and long walks and Chuck Norris.
Nice.
Fantastic. The topic of the day, unsurprisingly, is the question of whether or not SWTOR is hitting the end of the line or just a bump in the road. We've had several developments that have escalated this discussion. Of course, I'm sure we all remember back before our launch, there were people already saying, well, this game will never survive. And I don't think most people listened to them. And then, of course, after the initial numbers were released, that it had opened with 1.7 million players and dropped to 1.3 million, then the doomsayers, as I call them, gained a little more traction. And then came the discussions of low population on servers, which built the question even more. And then came the news this past week of layoffs among the staff. And we know Stephen Reed, unfortunately, was one of the ones who is no longer working with the game. And so now the question of whether or not the game is building a subscriber base and building toward a successful future or toward the end of the line has really become a relevant one. Especially those last two developments have made it much more of a viable question. So with that nice long introduction, I will start off with Mac, and let's see what y'all have to say.
Well, first things first, I think it's a natural order of things. They came out with content and they've had some problems, and the bottom line is that it is a business. They're here to make money, and sometimes you got to trim things down if you want to survive the long haul. Now, I'm not saying it's the end of the world, because they could pull through this feasibly and come back and hit it harder than ever. I mean, every company's going to have bumps in the road.
Yes, I agree. So I am sad to see Stephen Reed leave, though. But as far as the other people, I don't. I think it's more of a bump in the road. I don't think it's anything like they're gonna demise of the game or anything. I still think it has many years to come and many more patches and expansions and stuff like that. So I think it's just a bump in the road.
I would agree with you that it's not going to be the end of the game in any sense of the word. The game is not doing as well as some of the people before the game was launched thought it would. Partially, in my opinion, because I think expectations were just a little too high. There were so many things that people wanted this game to be that just kind of didn't turn out being. I'm actually really interested in to see how subscriptions are going to look after, say, people who did 6 months their first time are up. I feel that if there's, let's say there are still 1.3 million subscribers, even if some of those are coming from, let's say, the weekend pass players and stuff like that, I think the actual amount of people that are actively playing is probably considerably lower than that, especially since I feel a lot of people who, I think the PvP community is all but done with this game, a lot of them anyway. So I'm interested to see how things look after that first subscriber base drops off after all the free months and stuff like that. Do I think the game's done? No, absolutely not. But the large amount of firings maybe points to it getting much smaller.
It's a
And
layoff.
it's interesting to note that after the 6 months, it's August now because they gave us the day and the 30 days free. Um, I still think that it'll last a long time. I don't know if I don't know the specifics of who they fired except for the big names, of course. But
Let's see. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and put my 2 cents in before I ask if everybody got to say what they wanted to say before we go into a free for all. And I'm going to talk for a bit longer than they did. um, there are a lot of factors at play. It seems to me the subscriber base did drop, but there are two aspects to that. One is that that's normal. People join a game, they say ooh shiny, and then they jump to the next ooh shiny, or it wasn't what they expected, or they were going to try it out even though they were already invested in a game they'd been playing for years and years just to check it out, and just wasn't different enough or compelling enough or whatever, or it was too different to make them want to change from their normal game. So it's normal to see a peak and then a drop off in subscribers. Another thing to keep in mind, and I did not check the fact on this, I really should have, but it came from a fellow in the gaming industry, so hopefully the source is correct, is that out of the MMOs that have developed in the United States, not ones coming in from Korea or any other place, SWTOR is only the second that has more than 1 million subscribers. The first, of course, being World of Warcraft. Of course. We're never going to let you put it down. So it's still an extremely strong game in terms of numbers. The second thing is that server population is an issue. There are some servers on which, from what I understand, probably most of them, on which the population is low enough that it's really difficult for people to find groups, sometimes even just for heroics and flashpoints. But especially when you start getting into raids, it can be really difficult, especially if people aren't in a strong guild, and sometimes even if they are. So that is really something that's, I'm sure, causing the player base a lot of frustration. There had been hesitation, as I illustrate the word, to do anything about that, to merge servers, because that gives shareholders pause. But it's a question of, well, do you want to give shareholders pause, or do you want to hang on to your subscriber base? Because if people can't, it's an MMO. If people can't find people to play with, then they're going to go someplace where they can. So they had talked about the character transfers and how that is going to be the first step in addressing that. But the question is, when are we going to see those, and how effective is that going to be? That is going to be a really crucial issue, I believe, in the future of the game. One of the things, moving on to another point, that I think has been part of the complication, not quite the word I wanted, but I don't want to use something like problem or issue because that sounds too heavy, is the model of the game. That was one of the big draws, and it was one of the big aspects that set the game apart. The cinematics, the dialogue, the voiceover, seeing your own character in the scene as you're interacting with the NPCs. And that's really an awesome part of the game. However, it's very cost inefficient and time inefficient, because it takes a lot of time and money to put all of those together, and especially when you have them for every quest, it's going to be really difficult to afford to and have time to put out content at a rate at which the players are going to find it interesting to stay around. I didn't quite phrase that right, but you know what I mean. The devs said at one point that they weren't expecting players to tear through the content as quickly as they did. And there are two things here that I think are relevant. One is that SWTOR didn't diverge enough from the Warcraft model to make for unique enough gameplay to tear people away from that after they've already invested, 8 years into their character. That's my personal opinion. Not for long anyway. Once you play through the story, you get the novelty wears off. I think there was talk about Warcraft losing subscribers. I think at least some of those will go or have already gone back. their model isn't as cost effective. And one thing that Blizzard does really well, that just because of the nature of the SWTOR universe, I don't know that Bioware is going to be able to do, is that with each new expansion, Blizzard rolls out a new big bad who the entire expansion is focused around this new big bad, and all the in-game content, only the very last one do you actually get to fight that big bad. But man, they just make you want to kill that guy, so you hang in there until you can kill that guy, and then the next expansion comes out. So they really kind of build that sense of urgency and importance into it, which is crucial for the gaming population. I mean, that's one of the aspects of the gaming population. If you've heard any of Jane McGonigal's work, so there are several different aspects there. So the question becomes, not only did y'all want to comment on something that somebody else had already said, but also what do you think they need to do, now that I've blathered on for 15 minutes, to keep the game alive and really keep it as a strong, functioning, thriving population that will live on into the future?
Oh, we're still here.
Oh, is it our turn?
I warned everybody I had a lot to say.
Can I borrow that soapbox for a minute? No, I kid. In all seriousness, I kid.
One thing that they absolutely need to do if they want to consider going to keep subscribers going into the future is they've got to get ranked war zones in there. For the PvP community needs a lot of love. They seem to have been hit harder by problems in this game than just about anybody. Ilum was a big bust, and then now it's pretty much just been completely pulled. Ranked war zones got pushed back. They probably should have been in there from the very start. And just like you said, those servers with low pops. I mean, I hear stories of people like, I'm on during regular peak times for most people, and I can't even get a PvP match going because there's not enough people on both sides. So I know that it's coming in 1.3, but maybe it needs to come out a little sooner, is to get some character transfers going. And the interesting thing is that one of the big things that they pushed in the last couple patches, the whole legacy system, is kind of their biggest, I think, obstacle for people wanting to re-roll new characters on new servers, because you don't want to lose everything that's tied to that legacy system, especially when you know they're going to be introducing character transfers down the line. Whereas opposed to maybe some other MMO where you don't necessarily have all those big draws, they'd be like, all right, well, I can't play with anybody, let's go roll another server. Like, I don't want to lose everything that I've already put into this game. So that becomes kind of an issue, I think, which is why they need to do character transfers probably pretty soon, sooner than 1.3 if possible.
Yeah, definitely adding the ranked war zones in is something. It's a question now of, is it too little too late? Will it bring the PvP population back? And will the character transfers also be too little too late? Will it have the desired effect?
Whether or not it's too little too late, which, for the record, I think it might be too late to bring some of the big PvP community back. You'd have to get it out there, plus you'd have to show that things are really good right now to draw people back in. But whether or not it's too little too late, they need to get it done. Because you might as well take that shot. If you don't get it put in, you already know that's a problem.
Yeah,
so you've got to get it in one way or another, even if you do happen to think that it's too little too late. But the thing is that PvP can still be done very well in this game if there is a lot of organization between guilds, setting up times for like, hey, we'll come here, we'll get a group, we'll go to Outlaw's Den on Tatooine or someplace like that and just have big PvP thing going on. If you can get that going, that's fine. But that takes obviously a lot of coordination, and you can't just hop on at night like, hey, I want to do some ranked war zones. It's not going to happen. So yeah, it needs. I don't even PvP a lot. That's how much. This is how serious you can tell this is, because I honestly really don't care that much about PvP. But even I recognize how bad it is.
Well, I think what you might see with the ranked war zones is you might see pockets of people, friends that want to play in this universe and not another one, where there is, multiple games to choose from that all have PvP aspects to them. You'll probably see more pockets of people coming back rather than being able to pull back that large community that went, you guys done screwed up on this one. I'm gonna go over here for now, and you guys hang out over there. I mean, even with that being said, going back to the point earlier about um, players chewing through content pretty quickly, like rank war zones will bring back some people. Hopefully, that's still you still have your PvE community just generally chewing through your content to reuse that phrase multiple times. I've been on plenty of times during the weekends, during the afternoons, times where there should be lots of people on. I think at one point today, I was the only person on friggin' Corsa, and I was just standing there going, "Wow, I could take anything I wanted right now," and I
Yeah,
did.
what I wanted to put in was you have to. I think we have to keep in mind that the game is still only 6 months, not counting the beta, but it's only been out 6 months. So it's still a young game, and there's still room for improvement and time to improve. Um, Whether or not it'll bring people back, I think it depends on like the advertising and word of mouth, and websites saying, "Oh, PvP is better now than it used to be," or "PvP is much improved," and stuff like that. And also, like the server pop, I do have to say it is kind of disheartening to see, like, on the off occasion when I do get disconnected and I see the server screen, everything says light, and there's only like one that says standard on the North American tab. I really think it's high time for server mergers.
One of the things Fastcart brought up was the length of the time the game has been around, and that is an excellent point. And I think it's a point several of us have made in previous episodes. Is that really it's going to happen? It happens. It's just kind of a norm now in the MMO world. But it's really kind of unfair for people to compare Warcraft and SWTOR, because Warcraft does have that 8 years that it's been building and honing and creating new content and solving issues. And SWTOR had an incredibly smooth launch. And I remember when Warcraft launched. I mean, they comped us game time because the servers crashed so often. It wasn't announced downtime, even like we're going to bring servers down now, announce game time. It would crash. You'd be standing there for 10 minutes trying to loot bodies. We had a guy, we knew a guy who ended up getting killed by a copper node because he was trying to mine. He went to mine and just killed him. So, I mean, there were all sorts of weird bugs and crashes and lag. And so in that respect, if you actually compare them on a step-by-step basis, Warcraft didn't start with any in-game content. PvP was mostly people getting together and with groups and killing each other. Essentially, like I believe it was Joshua talking about, people organizing with each other. I mean, and that's what it was. So, but now that Warcraft has built that model, essentially people who have been playing it expect to just hop into an MMO and have it be 8 years of developed, polished game, and that's not really fair. And as far as the launch was, like I said, SWTOR had a much stronger launch. One of the things that they did do to make the launch smoother, which ended up, I think, kind of biting them in the boo-boo, was, and yes, I just said that, um, was that they did open up those additional servers to reduce the queue times. And then once the population dropped, and as I believe it was Georg Zoller said, that they found that the individual players weren't putting as much time into the game later on, which makes sense because you've got this big gaming rush to get to 50 or whatever you want to do. And then after that, you're like, oh, I don't need to do my 34-hour marathons anymore. I can relax. So you'll see a difference in server population because of each of those. So, but they opened all those additional servers so that queue times went down. And then after people stopped putting quite so much time into it, then you've got the low server population issue. So their launch was a lot smoother. They've got more content, but at the same time, there are some things that they could have done better. So the comparison, it's not really fair, but it's going to happen. Pretty much every new MMO is going to go through that.
Yeah, you can't avoid the comparison to WoW anytime you ever talk about MMO. But it's the fact is that there is never ever going to be another game like WoW. you're never going to have the population hit as high as it did. It just came on. It came to be at a perfect time in the genre, and it was a combination of good gameplay near the end and some cultural references that drew people in, and it was just fantastic. And since so many people got more, I feel that if WoW had not become as popular as it did, we might have gotten KOTOR 3 instead of SWTOR, because it made so many more people interested in the genre. So that's when you take, like, well, maybe we should turn Star Wars into an MMO. Look at how good Blizzard's doing over there. But no one's ever going to do that again. So the comparison is really, it's unavoidable, but as you say, completely unfair, because it's never going to hit that. That doesn't mean that there aren't things that people should take from WoW that they had put in over time and have them in at the beginning of your game, though. Like ranked war zones, for example, if you want to look at the PvP community. Group Finder, at least in some aspect, target of targets. So, some things that they've got in now, but it's hard to not look at some of the examples that WoW has set and wonder, why didn't you guys just kind of do that already in the first place? Why is it being added later?
Could have something to do with the fact that a lot of gamers nowadays are, what's the word I'm looking for? I wouldn't say ADD, but I would say it's kind of, flashy, new, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. 3 months later, this sucks because it's the same thing over and over and over. I'm going to go do something else for 3 months over and over and over. Rinse and repeat, which is it's kind of the cycle. I mean, if you look at regular, not the single amount, but if you look at single-player games on, say, consoles or PC, or, I mean, hell, even those friggin' $5 ones you can pick up at the grocery store, you're going to play it a couple of times and go, and move on to something else. I mean, with an MMO, it's an ever-changing, an ever-growing thing that hopefully would stick around for a while if it's decent. I mean, I'm not saying that all of them are, but this one keeps my attention, and I don't mind playing alts.
Yeah, Mac was talking about, I call it the ferret syndrome. It's like, ooh, bright shiny. Ooh, bright shiny. So yeah.
Oh, the squirrel.
Yeah.
The squirrel from over the hedge. The Steve Carell. Let's call it the Carell. Coined right there.
There you go, new term.
The Carell.
So, my question is, well, not really a question, maybe a suggestion. Do you think that they might change from subscription-based to microtransaction if they see if they're going to make them more money? Because, I mean, like this year, as far as I know, they're like one of the few newer MMOs that are still doing subscription-based instead of microtransaction.
I think if it ever happens, this is very early in its life for that to happen. I mean, if you just look at subscriptions and the amount of people who play stuff like that, I think BioWare has done well with this game. I mean, I don't think there's any question there that they're doing very much too. I don't know how much they paid to use the SWTOR franchise, but if some of the estimates that people have put out there, if you look at how many of the subscribers we've seen, and you'll make a prediction on, let's say they bought this much amount of time and were subscribed for it, they've almost made back pretty much most of the stuff that people have predicted that they probably paid for just to use the Star Wars title. So I think them going free to play sends a bad signal, kind of, to a lot of people. And since that they're not doing poorly as far as sales go, really, right now, why would you?
Well, one of the discussions that's come up is the question of adding microtransactions in, not going free to play, but also supplementing with that. There's a perception, as I understand it, that when a game goes free to play, it's starting to get desperate. But to bring the comparison of WoW back in, there were the pets that you could buy and all sorts of vanity items. So the conversation has come up of possibly having microtransactions for like vanity items and things like that would add more revenue into the game, possibly even more interest, especially like for some of the role players who want those vanity items. I think if they entered microtransactions into the game that would affect combat, I think you'd start to see a lot of anger around that personally. But yeah, as far as I understand the question of possibly introducing, I don't think it's come from an official level, but there's been some discussion of that.
Yeah, I don't see them using microtransactions to affect combat. I mean, I don't think any modern game would go that route now.
It would be an incredibly stupid move, and you have to hope that the people over there making that game are smarter than that. Otherwise, this show's in a lot of trouble.
basically.
So it looks like we get an off-topic one. Finally, my expertise. What were we talking about?
One of the things that, well, there are two things I'd like to say. One, you were just talking about hoping that the people over there are smart and know what they're doing. And that was one of the things that I think the layoff signal, I mean, it's standard once you build, you create the game, you need a lot more people to create it than you do to maintain it day to day. So, some people are going to move on to other things. But one of the things about the Star Wars community that it seemed to me fairly unique, is that there had been so much interaction between the devs and the actual game, the player base, the gamer community. So we knew, I mean, these weren't just, usernames in a different font color. We knew these people's faces, we knew their names, we knew how they approached the game, what their goals were. And so I think especially since we don't even really know who all was laid off other than Stephen Reed, I think in laying off people, now there's a question among the community of, well, what now? Is the philosophy going to change? Is the way they're going to approach things like class balance going to change? Is it going to change for the better? Is it going to change for the worse? What do we do now? What do we expect? And Joshua also brought up KOTOR 3, and that was a discussion I'd been having earlier this week with actually our editor, was should they have made KOTOR 3 instead of trying to get into an MMO? Would it have been more successful that way?
Yeah, but I mean, who would have done the Old Republic MMO then? Honestly, I mean, if you look at it from my point of view, it might send a bad message to lay people off. And yes, you do have a point where it doesn't take as many people to run it as it does to create it. They didn't give any of us a exhaustive list of people that got laid off. They just said, hey, we laid some people off, and then that was it. It happens. And they probably have a pretty good business plan. At least I would hope that they have a pretty good business plan to get them through this rocky point. Because, yeah, you're going to have ebb and flow of subscriptions. You're going to have people come and go. And hopefully they'll just be able to pull through it. And, within the next couple of months, they'll be able to straighten everything out. A couple of months is kind of being generous, but hopefully we can stop having, serious discussions about where the game is going. And you guys can start asking yourself, what do I really have on below the camera?
and trust me, it's nice. It's nice. You got to see a little behind the scenes after show.
Yeah.
One thing that you brought up earlier, the only other person that I have seen, and I think this was over at Tor Wars, one of the community assurance or quality assurance, some of those people were let go as well. I'm actually, and I was talking about this earlier, I am not that shocked that Stephen Reed is no longer around. I don't agree with the decision because I feel like he was great at dealing with a lot of people screaming at him about how bad SWTOR was even after they stopped playing, which it's like, why are you even complaining then, because you're not playing the game? But whatever. But a lot of the community that was part of this game before launch and during launch and have stuck with it for a while are just not happy with the game. And he's the community dude. So it doesn't it doesn't surprise me that much that they're like, hey, well, let's try to take things in a new direction here. Maybe this is one area that we can improve and try to win some of these people back. Like I said, I don't necessarily agree with the decision, but it doesn't completely shock me. Would they have been more successful with KOTOR 3, something else that you had touched on earlier, Sen? I don't think they would have been as successful in the long term. I think it maybe would have seen as many initial sales because everyone was a huge fan of the first KOTOR, especially, which was done by BioWare. Obsidian could have done a little better with their storytelling part of it, or at least their bug catching it. But once you go back to BioWare making a KOTOR game, you'd be like, oh, of course I want to play this game. But I don't think it would have been as successful in the long term, which is probably why they made the move to do this.
Yes, I think they would have. I think they're almost successful making it an MMO instead of making KOTOR 3. I mean, you have people playing it for longer, and if they budget the money correctly, they'll make tons of more money than just a single player RPG. One of the things that I wanted to, I'm thinking about as far as the layoffs go. I mean, I'm not a business person, but I don't know whether or not the layoffs were like always planned at some point, or whether or not maybe the people who were laid off were people who wanted to put off Rank Warzone, and that's a punishment or some sort. But I don't really think so. But I mean, we just don't know what's going on behind the scenes.
I'm pretty sure they punish with licorice whip spankings over there at BioWare. I don't think firings is the way they go.
I'm pretty sure.
I read that in a document somewhere. I can't remember exactly where.
How do you know that it wasn't a slave uprising on Droman Koss and they got shipped the rest of them off world? And red vines is the way to go. It leaves better marks.
Not going to ask how you know that.
Yeah, I'll tell you later.
That's for the after show. And one of the things is that Stephen Reed really put a good face on BioWare and on the game. And I think one of the reasons that there are some questions isn't so much because of BioWare, is because of EA. EA has a little bit of a rocky reputation when it comes to some of their decisions. So, of course, there's always going to be speculation regardless of what's going on, and how rational decisions are. We've seen that. There's going to be complaints and people running around like their hair is on fire and all of that with everything. Joshua brought up one thing, that among the community sites, there's been some downsizing. Some of them are not putting out content anymore. Some of them are getting rid of some folks. Some of them are merging. So that's an interesting aspect of it too. I mean, in a way, you kind of expect that after the big excitement of launch wears off, because people aren't going to community sites to get all their news anymore. They're playing the game. But at the same time, there are plenty of thriving community sites for some of the other games. So is that sending a message?
It's not surprising to me. There are so many SWTOR fan sites out there, especially before launch and around. It would be shocking to me if all of them had stuck around even this long. Some people have stopped because they stopped playing the game. Some people, as you said, I know people that, this website shut down, so they went over and started working on this one, and you've seen some go between there. But, I mean, even as something else that speaks to maybe the community being unhappy, there's people who have stopped because they don't have faith in the game anymore. Or I've even seen some people that work on certain sites, just not necessarily maybe in their articles, but talking about in the comments and stuff like that, hearing some that even their complaints. And these are some of the core, I mean, there are people that help drive the community for free for as far as BioWare goes. I mean, they take time out of their own busy lives to help promote the game, essentially. And when some of them start getting unhappy, it's not surprising, but it can be troubling to see and unfortunate, because it's, as far as people who really enjoy playing the game, SWTOR has a great community. There are some haters out there on especially some certain websites, but there's a core group of people that just absolutely love this game. Maybe partially because it's Star Wars and partially because of BioWare, but it's disheartening to see some people go when you've known them and interacted with them so long.
I just like playing with you guys.
That's so sweet.
Yeah, I know. You guys could take off and start playing, Battletoads, and I would drive to your house in a Pinto in, a banana hammock and pink sandals if I had to, just to play Battletoads with you. I'm going off on a tangent.
We love your tangents.
I need a tissue.
You can come over and play Battletoads and Double Dragons old school anytime you want, Mac. Yes.
And that really is a large part of it, is the community you play with, not just the larger gaming community, and not the gaming company, or even sometimes the game. Is just the actual group of people that you play with, that you interact with, whether or not you build those friendships and bonds and things like that. It makes a huge difference, which I think is one of the reasons that BioWare was pushing community as much as they have been. So, excellent point.
Does that make us part of the community?
Of course.
Maybe not you so much.
I'm like fringe.
Yeah.
I'm like that fringe Chuck Norris lookalike.
You're like that douchebag that you occasionally have to play with and listen to talk sometimes, but he still shows up and does a decent job, so we keep him around.
Right.
That's the position I see you filling.
Your
as far as our
microphone
group.
is too damn loud. Turn it down. I'm 10 feet away.
So we have one last final, very, very important question this week. It's Sin's pressing question of the week, and that is
Briefs.
that's the question that's coming after.
I'm kidding. It's jockeys.
During the Guild Summit, whenever they were discussing operations, and they actually instead accidentally was what I was looking for, used the word raids. Georg Zoller at one point made a joke that everybody should drink when that happened. So if we're using the word operations, what is the verb form of that? Because raids, you go raiding. How do you, because operating has a whole different meaning already. So what's the verb form? Go.
Opping. Squashing.
Operating, raiding.
Owling. Planking. Noodling. Canoodling. Spooning. I like spooning. Such a fine line between spooning and holding someone down so they can't get away.
I've got nothing after all that. How could you follow that string of just wonderful incoherence?
I'm going to have to start going last.
Yeah, I'm glad I went interrupted him doing his little thing instead of going after.
Yeah, I've got nothing to add.
I've never even thought of that before. I generally I think most everyone just calls it rating anyway, but
Yes.
what would you call that? It's stupid. That's why I'm just going to call it rating.
Well, what would you call flashpointing?
FPN.
FPN.
It's fapping.
That's what we're going to call it.
Think about it. Let's go fapping. A 4-man fap.
Let's get a group of guys together. We'll go fapping.
There's a subreddit for that already.
Does anybody have any closing comments, questions, ideas, suggestions, anything like that before we call it a wrap?
Pretty soon there's going to be enough players where you can all get together in one movie theater and take it over. Yeah, I don't know.
Whenever character transfers and stuff like that does happen, I encourage everyone to come over and hang out with us over on the Juyo server. Because I think we've actually got a very solid community over on that server. So do you want to come hang out with us? Maybe you really hate all 4 of us and you just want to sign up so you can kill us? Do that. That's fine. Just come over and play with us.
Maybe you just want to stalk us? I don't know. We're not celebrities now.
I will sign my jockey shorts and send them to people for cash.
We really do have a strong, solid community on the Juyo server. Not just community-wise, but also we have we have people who are dedicated and really good at PvP who work together when the queues won't pop to actually have PvP events. So it is, these people are committed to community and committed to making things happen, whether BioWare does it or not. So yeah, it's really an awesome server and awesome community. So yeah, if anyone's looking for a place to go whenever they bring those character transfers in, or if you just want to re-roll, join us on either side at the Juyo server. Not necessarily in our guild if you want to, great, but yeah, come. And you have to make a tune on the Republic side and whisper Sarah Bear and tell her to name the twins Luke and Leia.
Yes, Sin, bringing it. Love it, love it.
Totally plug that, didn't you?
We've got 9 more months of plugging it, folks, so you might as well just whisper and tell her.
Just send me your phone number. I'll make it happen.
Not only are the community active and stuff like that, we actually have a Wednesday get together for the PvP community. I don't know if it's going to be every Wednesday, but I don't know when this show will air. But yes, so yeah, we have a pretty good community for PvP. Also, the economy is pretty good also. So, by the way, people keeping track, yes, my jar is empty from the FC drinking game. So,
how many butt yas are we at now?
I lost count.
It's because we went above 3. I can't do this much longer. This water is getting to me. Seriously, if you're coming to the Juyo server, leave me alone. Seriously, you want to come over and talk about people's kids and chase the cart around and, you know, yank on Sandy's hair, that's fine, but just leave me alone. I'm kidding. No, I'm really.
Okay. So
You know what? I had a pretty good reputation when this game first started for being a pretty good healer and be willing to help people. Not to toot my own horn, but that kind of died off, you know, lately. I don't understand why.
People probably figured out you weren't that great of a healer.
No, I think it was probably because I kept tabbing out.
in a minute, you love tooting your own horn. You can't get enough of that.
I do, and no, that's not what we named it.
Now that we had an extremely important end of the show discussion,
Hey,
I'm
my
going-
fly's closed.
oh, at least you're wearing one. I've got a t-shirt on.
My fly? No, actually, it's sewed closed. I took precautions before the show.
I would like to thank everybody for joining us, for watching today. We had a bit of a heavy topic, but we wound up a little more entertaining, I certainly hope.
Send questions.
And what?
Questions. Send questions. Send lots of questions.
Oh yes, please.
We like
Please
questions.
feel free to send
And comment.
your questions
And
and
waffles.
comments.
And suggestions.
I'm threadjacking the goodbye.
And bacon. I'm helping
And
with
bacon.
the jacket.
Bacon
waffles.
Bacon
Absolutely.
waffles. Bacon waffles and coffee.
I had some bacon pancakes the other day. They were amazing.
Oh,
Were they?
that sounds good.
Mhm.
Are they sitting on that desk back there? Is that what that is?
No,
Is it a mushroom?
that is mushroom back there. Yes,
Is it bacon mushroom?
it was at one point.
Mushroom waffle?
That just sounds gross.
Yeah, that doesn't actually sound good. I love waffles, but that doesn't sound good.
I'd do it just to say I could. Or did.
Everybody loves mushrooms.
See, and yet, there you go. And you just told me you wouldn't eat a mushroom waffle.
I wouldn't eat a mushroom waffle. Well, how did we start talking about this? I thought we were saying goodbye.
Well, that's just how our discussions go. We
I
know
even
this. They
warned
may
you.
not have. Well, with all of that under our belt, thanks again for joining us. Indeed, if you would like to send comments, questions, suggestions, be a guest panelist, I can talk, I promise. Feel free to comment on the YouTube page or send me an email at Sandy, that is with an IE, at fragworld.org. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks so much for joining us. Bye. I am guild leaders of... I fucked it up again.